Hello folks, and welcome to the Ocean State Cuisine. In today's video I'm going to be going over how to make fish and chips. And then we're also going to be making fried sea scallops. These things are delicious. And then to complement all this, we're going to be making a homemade tartar sauce. But first I'd like to go over my background when it comes to fish and chips. And what I mean by all this is that I started cooking in a fairly large restaurant. They actually have 4 locations in the small state of Rhode Island. And it's a very well-known restaurant in all of New England. Even President Obama ate there. Billy Joel, the list goes on. And they're really noted for their desserts. And the restaurant is called Greg's Restaurant with 2 G's at the end. And the menu is humongous. They must have at least 25 sandwiches just when it comes to sandwiches. Corned beef dinners, turkey dinners, all kinds of pasta, salads, seafood, you name it, they made it. Which then later on I got promoted to daytime kitchen supervisor. So the reason why I'm telling you guys all this is because we were really noted for our fish and chips. To the point that they used to go through a couple of 100 pounds of fish just on the weekends per location. And the location that I worked at was the closest to the ocean, which was about 10 minutes away. And all of our fish would get trucked in each morning right from the co-ops. But they also had a large commissary that would pre-make a lot of recipes and foods and then ship them in each morning that we would use on a daily basis. And one of it was the fish and chip or the fish batter, which came in a powder form, of course, and we just added water to it and we would whisk it. So the batter that I'm going to be using in today's recipe is not the recipe from Greg's. But I'll tell you, if you put my fish next to theirs, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. So if you guys really like fish and chips, I think you found the right video. So with all this being said, let's get started. We have a very small seafood store, not far from where I live right now in North Carolina, which is in the mountains, the Smoky Mountains. And this place is about 10 to 15 minutes away. And they actually get trucked in each morning from Maine, fresh seafood and fish. And what I'm using here is codfish. Codfish is one of the best fish for fish and chips. Scrod is another form of cod. It's just a smaller cod. And then another great fish for fish and chips is called haddock. So we got some nice sized fillets here, and I'm just cutting them up a bit into smaller pieces. But they are still a nice sized piece of fish. Especially once we put the batter on them, they're going to almost double in size appearance wise. And usually when I cut my fish, I do it on a bit of an angle. It gives it more of a natural appearance to the final product. If you see a perfectly square piece of fish, you're going to think it's processed. And we can see right here, we're not using processed fish. Now for now I'm going to put the fish aside and we're going to start on the sea scallops. And again, we buy these scallops at the same store as we bought the fish. And let me tell you something. They have some of the best sea scallops I've ever eaten in my life. These come down from Maine. They are so sweet and tender. They are delicious. So what I'm doing first is that I'm going to mix some egg with some milk. And we're going to just whip that up together. And get that nice and blended. This is going to help the coating stick to the scallops. Now I have a pretty large fryer later. So at this time I got this heating up on about 360 Fahrenheit. Because we want to get that oil nice and hot. Now, in a large food storage bag, we have the scallops, and now we're going to add the egg mixture to the scallops. If you guys watch some of my other videos and I use a batter or flour or anything like that, you see me using those bags a lot. They're very handy for that. And that's it with the scallops for now. So now I'm just going to put them in the refrigerator or just put them off to the side, and we'll continue with those a little bit later. Now I put some flour in a bowl right here, and we're going to start working on the flour and the batter now for the fish. And I would say for the amount of fish that I'm cooking today, I'm probably using about 4 to 5 cups. You want to use quite a bit of flour, and I'm going to show you why in just a few moments. So now it's time to season our flour. So in goes some salt. And I add a good amount of salt because this fish is not salty at all. And that is a good amount of flour right there. So we want to make sure that these seasonings are definitely going to be all over that fish. Now we're going to use some ground pepper. And then next I'm going to be using a seasoning that's probably one of the oldest seasoning ever made, called Old Bay. Old Bay is awesome for seafood and fish. It's also really good too on chicken and other kinds of things. It just adds some nice earthy tones to your food. No, I can't really see what bottle that is, but I think it's the garlic powder. But we're using both the garlic powder and the onion powder. And like I said, okay, there's the onion powder. And like I said, we're not going to be shy when it comes to seasoning up this flour. This is really what brings out the flavor and adds great flavor to the cod. Now next we're going to add a little bit of baking powder. Be careful using baking powder. If you add too much, it can really give it kind of like a chemical taste. So for this amount, I probably use like 2 flat teaspoons. Baking powder is an agent that helps batters rise and become airy and crunchy. If you don't have baking powder, you can use baking soda. But just be careful also when it comes to using too much. You know how yeast works when it comes to dough? That's basically how these powders work when it comes to batters. It makes it where it's not going to taste like a brick. Now we're just going to make sure that everything's mixed well. And I think that that's pretty much it when it comes to all the seasoning. Now next, this is why we wanted to make sure that we made enough of this. While it's still in its dry form, we're going to put some on a plate. Just like that. Because what we're going to do is that we're going to dredge the fish, each side, in this dry plate before we actually add it to the wet batter. That's going to help it stick better to the fish. And it's well seasoned, so that seasoning is going to get right added to that fish. Now here's the secret that I use. Actually, I think a lot of cooks use this nowadays. We're going to thin this out and make the batter with beer. Beer has a great chemical reaction when it comes to the baking powder. We're going to see it fizz up a bit, and that's what really gives that batter that nice flaky, airy, that real nice crunch. It just gives you an awesome battered fish. Plus the beer adds great flavor. You want to keep adding the beer until it gets to the consistency of like pancake batter. A little bit thicker than like a cake batter. And just keep whisking it, and that's going to let you know on how much more beer you actually have to add. If you don't have beer, you can use water. And no, cooking with alcohol does not get you drunk, so don't worry about that. The alcohol gets evaporated as soon as that baby hits the heat. Okay, it's starting to get to the consistency that I like it to be. We're just going to add a little more beer. So yes, it does take quite a bit of liquids to get this at the right consistency. Now, when it comes to fish and chips and where you live, I noticed that there's a big difference. Like back home, most of the restaurants made really good fish and chips, and they give you a nice big piece of fish. Where I live now, not really. The pieces are very small, and they use other kinds of like fish. Again, scrod, cod, and haddock is really what fish and chips are supposed to be made from. And some places nearby also use frozen fish. So, yes, if I lived in Rhode Island, I would not be making my own fish and chips. But seeing where I live now, I don't really have a choice. So we could see that this batter is getting at a nice consistency now. It looks just like pancake batter. See? That's the way you want it to be. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin. Now you can make this advanced like earlier and then refrigerate it and use it later on. You may just have to add some more liquid to it because it's going to thicken up as it sits. Okay, so now we have our wet batter and we have our dry. Side by side and right next to the fryer later. Because when you make fish and chips, your kitchen can get rather messy. So now we're going to get a piece of fish right here, and we're just going to put it in the flour like that. And then now we're going to dip it. Just like that. You can use tongs if you want. But I just usually use my hands. Well, I should say my fingers. And if the pieces are small enough, you could probably fit more than one in the bowl at the same time, just like this. Now for the fryer later. Now if you want to test to see if your oil's hot enough, get a little piece of like white American bread and just throw it in there and see if it sizzles. And believe it or not, fish and chips taste the best when your oil is not totally new. In the restaurant we had to change it each time, but that's different because that's a restaurant, you know. Now notice on how I put that fish in. I get it and I kind of swirl it around. What that does is that it makes it where it doesn't sink right to the bottom. And this here way it just floats better. And you don't ever want to use a basket when you're using a wet batter, because it's going to stick to the basket and you'll never get it off. And the cooking time, I would say, I really go by looks and the texture of the batter as it's cooking. But I would say, depending on the size, anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes. You don't want them to be doughy, but you also don't want to overcook this. And after using this fryer later today, this baby's getting a bath. In the restaurant, we had a special fryer later just for fish. And it was literally about 4 feet by 4 feet wide. You could fit like 20 pieces, 25 pieces, all in the same time. And the fish that we use, we cut them down to 9 ounces, which is a big piece of fish. So we can see that it's looking good. It's starting to get some color now. So now we're going to move on to the scallops. And with another food storage bag, we're going to use that leftover flour, the dry flour, that we dredged the fish in. That's what we're going to coat the scallops with, because it's already seasoned. Now, what I'm going to be doing now is optional. I'm going to be mixing some fine breadcrumbs with it also. So we're going to have like a 50-50 ratio of the flour and the breadcrumbs. Scallops are great in either just breadcrumbs or just flour, but mixing the two together gives it a nice batter. Shake that vigorously inside the bag, get it all well mixed. And then in the meantime too, what we want to do is now take our scallops that we have soaking in the bag with the egg mixture, and we want to drain off that excess egg using like a sifter or a colander. And now in goes the scallops. We're just going to wrap up that bag pretty tight on the top, make sure that there's enough room on the bottom, and we're going to give it a nice shake. We want to make sure that those scallops get well coated. And let's pull one out so you guys can see what it looks like. And nice and coated. Now what I do over the sink or over a garbage can is that I put them inside the basket. I just dump the whole bag with the flour and all over the sink into one of these baskets and then just sift it back and forth, and that gets rid of all the excess flour. And because the Scallops has a dry batter on it or coating, we could use the baskets now for the fryer later. And we're going to cook these for about anywhere from about 6 to 7 minutes. Now you can make small bay scallops the same way, just cook them a lot less, like 2 minutes and they're done. But these scallops are a pretty nice size and they're meaty. I know this video is pretty long today, but we're covering a lot of things because now we're going to be making our homemade tartar sauce. This is so much better than anything you will buy in a market already pre-made. And I did mean to post this at the start of the video because you want to try to make this ahead of time and refrigerate it. It makes it set up and thicken up more. So first we're going to add some mayonnaise, as we see here. Now we're going to add some sweet relish. And I add a good amount. The store-bought kind, they don't add enough. This is the main reason why I like to make my own. And when I worked at a child care as the cook there, the teachers and the staff really love this tartar sauce. So we're going to mix this up really good. And you want it to look rather chunky, so you want to add a little more relish to it. As we see here. Now we're gonna put in a little bit of lemon juice. And then we're gonna add some onion powder. And black pepper is like the star here. And something I didn't add today in today's video, but you could add it to yours if you like it. It's really good if you like it spicy, some hot sauce. It gives it a really nice kick. And that's a pretty nice texture right there and consistency, but like I said, you want to refrigerate it normally for at least a couple of hours. And that's going to set it up nice. And now to add a little bit of earthy tones to it and a nice garnish, we're going to top it with some paprika. Or however you pronounce it. And that's pretty much it for the tartar sauce. We're now going to put some plastic wrap on the top of that and store it inside the refrigerator. So again, let's make it believe that we made this before making the fish. And there we are, folks. What do you think? Looks good, huh? Now, I know I did say fish and chips, and I forgot to show you guys the French fries. But we know what French fries look like. I think everybody knows how to make French fries. Again, I just use the frozen kind. Just put them in the fryer later for a while, and you're all set and good to go. So, there's our fish right there. Beautiful color, nice crisp. What an awesome piece of fish. And there's our homemade tartar sauce that we chilled now for a good couple of hours. And our wonderful Maine sea scallops. Now, I know a lot of people sometimes ask, how come the best shellfish and seafood comes from up north, like Maine? And we know that some of the best crab in the world comes from Alaska. When it comes to this kind of shellfish, or even some fish, cold water is the best. Somehow, it adds more of a sweetness to the taste of the fish, and it gives you a more solid piece of fish and seafood. It's not soft, and it's not mushy. And Maine waters has a lot of rocky shorelines, so when you dig up clams, they're not all filled up with sand. They're nice and clean. They're delicious. So anyways, folks, there's my rendition right there of fresh cod, fish and chips, and sea scallops. complemented by a homemade awesome tartar sauce. Give it a try. So I want to thank you again for stopping by and watching the Ocean State Cuisine. Feel free to sub up for more awesome dishes coming your way. Comment down below because as always, we love to hear from you. Until the next time, you guys have yourself a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.